the Quran mentions marriage, but also the Hadith elaborates, in many statements about marriage. And the Prophet, again, when you study about the Prophet and learn about him, Muslims love the Prophet and feel like he was a very human and humane, down-to-earth person that they can relate to. He would laugh and be happy and cry in situations that, like the death of his daughter, for example. He wasn't ashamed to die and said that's a normal thing to do. So in wedding ceremonies, he said that people should announce the weddings by having music and making and giving food and like having a party. Otherwise, I'm sure some very strict people nowadays would have said like, no, this is haram, because lots of people, who are very, very strict, love to make everything, like an offense to God. And of course, being human, why not be happy? If you're healthy, getting married, you should celebrate. And there is lots of hadith about how you should choose a wife. So a woman should, one of the hadith of the Prophet says something to the effect that usually women are sought after for their wealth and their beauty, but izfar bidat ad-din, like find a woman who is pious. And then of course the same applies to wife's choice of a husband. So again, like a woman, usually the tradition is you should marry somebody in your social status or somebody who has more wealth, but at the same time, if somebody is wealthy and corrupt, there is no point of getting married to them because they'll give you a hard life and will not respect you. So it's better, again, to marry someone who is pious. And there are hadiths that says, like, if somebody pious comes to you, seek your marriage, the marriage of your daughter, then allow him to marry her. So there are tons and tons of hadith directing people towards choosing wisely, choosing somebody who is good. No one should be forced to marry anyone, and so there has to be consent. So like, even if it's like, just by being quiet. So a father comes and asks his daughter, so-and-so is asking for your hand in marriage, do you agree? And if she say, smiles and is quiet and doesn't say like, no, I hate him, then that is tacit consent and should be accepted. There is lots, I don't know whether it's true or not, but there's lots of stories that you'd say, hear that, a man never saw his wife until their wedding night, and then he was shocked by how ugly she was or whatever. In the hadith it says that when somebody comes to seek the hand in marriage of a bride, the family should sit with them, but he should see her face and hands, and some tradition even say her feet, so that they'll know, like, does she do labor work? Is her hands, soft? Is she beautiful enough that, or would he like her? Would she like him? So there has to be, affection between the couple, and it shouldn't be just forced. And of course, again, there is like these, like stereotypes of like people never saw each other, they never interacted. But it seems that even in the time of the Prophet, the mosque was open to everybody. The women came and talked to the Prophet, and as was mentioned yesterday in the chapter called Al-Mujadala or Al-Mujadila, either the argument or the arguing one, being female, one woman came to the Prophet and argued with him about her rights, in marriage. So there are many rights given to women, both, in the Quran and then in the Hadith as well. And there is this, for example, this Hadith at the end: "Let no one of you fall upon his wife like a donkey falls upon a she-donkey." So in other words, like the Prophet saying, like, be nice to your wife, don't treat her bad all day, and then suddenly at night decide that she should, be there and willing. So you have to be nice and compassionate. And in the library here, there are lots of hadith books, and one of the collections is Sunan al-Nisa'i, which happens to be Nisa'i. Nisa is women in Arabic. It's interesting. The word for woman in Arabic is imra'a, and then the plural of it is nisa, which two words that have nothing to do with each other. I don't know why that started, and Nisa doesn't have a singular, but in Nisa'i, I don't know what his name comes from. And Khalid, do you know? Okay, so his name comes from a place where he came from, but then I just picked the volume yesterday to make a point to a couple of people, and then it turned out that I opened on, the part that deals with women and their rights. So it starts even by, the hadith books, the big collections that Dr. Shafia mentioned yesterday, the ones that have hundreds of thousands of hadiths collected by Bukhari and Muslim and so on. They do go into great detail about everything. How do you do ablution? If the water was sitting out in the sun, would it be clean to use for ablution? So there is a segment that deals with women. So here it starts first by, is it okay to use water that a cat had drank from? And then it says, fine, cats are clean. And then, is it okay to use water where a menstruating woman has touched? Yes, it's fine, because the Prophet and his wife used to drink from the same, jar or pot or cup or whatever. And then it starts to talk more about menstruation and about, again, ablution, sleeping next to your wife if she has her monthly period, the difference between, having your period and then more than the number of days that a woman should have her period, and keeps going on and on, and then. And these things, lots of times people don't necessarily memorize the hadith, but Islam, is a way of life. So lots of these things have become ingrained in the tradition that you just ask your mother, Mom, I have my period, what should I do? Can I pray? Can I not pray? When a young girl gets her period. And the mother would know right away, sometimes knowing that this is what the Prophet said, and sometimes just this is the tradition that people have been passing down in generation. Here, it's interesting to read hadith and fiqh books and so on, because some of it could be very pornographic. So if we're sitting here in mixed company, but this hadith is about sleeping with your wife if she has her period. And so it's a hadith, so it starts by saying, we were told by so-and-so who got this narration from so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. It comes down to Salama, who's one of the wives of the Prophet. She was sleeping with the Prophet ﷺ, and then she got her period. So she got up and changed her clothes. So he told her, oh, you have your period now? So she said, yes. So he said, oh, don't worry, just come back and lay back with me in the same sheet. So this is one hadith. And then there's more to the same effect. And so there are several wives saying, how the Prophet behaved with them, that it was okay for a woman, to sleep next to her. And if his clothes get dirty, then he can go up and wash them too. And then they can eat together. Again, he can use the water that she used. He can sleep and, put his head in her lap and read Quran while she's menstruating. And then here a menstruating woman doesn't have to pray, and that she doesn't have to make up the days either. Women do make up the fast, but they don't make up the prayers. And then there's a cute one about how the Prophet told his wife, give me my robe, and she said, but I have my period. He said, your period is not in your hand. So it's really, again, down to earth, everyday type of questions that people still have, and then you can find the answer in the hadith. So the Prophet always told, people would follow his sunnah, his example, but also follow the reports that are transmitted down after him. So in the sunnah, he was very gentle. He played with Aisha, his youngest wife, and she would say, he always, when we raced, I would win him at first, but then I became fat, so he would win me. And he would carry her to watch the singers and dancers, and he would mend his own shoes, and so he was like an exemplary husband. If husbands really behaved like that, the earth would be a better place. But anyway, when it comes to marriage and family welfare, people ask about things. It's like, is it permissible to use contraception? Is it okay to have abortion? What about polygamy? So all these things are dealt with in Islam. And of course, always keep in mind that there is the theory and the real teaching, and then things that people did not follow maybe, so they are, misapplication. But if people go back to the Quran and Sunnah, or the primary sources, they'll find that everything was very just and for the welfare of people. So there are indications that yes, there was sheepskin condoms that people used at that time, and that, in the Quran itself, when God said that a woman could nurse her child for up to 2 years, I guess people take that as allowing spacing between children, so you shouldn't be pregnant every year. So you have a baby, you nurse it for 2 years, and then have another baby, so that would be 3 years later. When it comes to abortion, bless you, it is interesting that Muslims might be more lenient than Catholics when it comes to abortion. It's allowed, within the first few weeks of conception, that if there is a very strong reason that the baby needs to be aborted, that it could be aborted if a Muslim doctor allows it. And that's for the saving of the life of the woman. So it shouldn't just be for the fun of it, but like if there is really a critical reason for it. But it's controversial, and people generally try to avoid abortion if they can. Polygamy is only mentioned one time in the Quran, even though people make such a big fuss about it. And in modern time, in most Muslim nations now, polygamy is not very accepted. You might find it actually, interestingly enough, like in Philadelphia area, there are polygamous couples, and but they look at it as charity. So like, let's say a man is married to a woman, and then his best friend dies, and then the woman is left with 3-4 children, and she doesn't work, and what would she do? So out of charity, he'll go marry that woman. But usually, people don't like that. And if you do marry more than one woman, then you have to be fair to her. God warns against being unfair. He says if you have given a wife a qintar is like a measure of like a humongous amount of things, do not take any of it. And the 2 wives have to be treated equally. If you buy one thing for one wife, you have to buy the same thing for the other wife. You can't put them in the same house. And you have to divide your hours between the wives. And you shouldn't do it in secret, of course, although some people do resort to that. And lots of time you would hear about so-and-so died, and then his wife was devastated, not just because he died, but because it turned out that the next door neighbor was his second wife. It was like, what? So you'll hear like horror stories like that. Okay, there is a hadith that reads in English, every one of you is a shepherd, and each one of you is responsible for his charges. The man is a shepherd in his house and responsible for his charges. The woman is a shepherd in her house, responsible for her charges, and so on. There is more to the hadith. So again, a woman is held equal to men under both, the Quran, as you yourselves pointed, that in the Quran it says the believing women and the believing men, the Muslim women and the Muslim men, and so on. But in the hadith also, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Okay, when we come to divorce, usually there is like a big fuss about like, it's much easier for a man to divorce his wife than it is for a woman. And that could be true, but at the same time, remember that, Catholicism originally, Catholic Church didn't allow divorce, and the fact that now people do seek divorce and get it doesn't mean that it is allowed, and if you're very strict Catholic, you might find it very horrendous idea that somebody would get a divorce. My next door neighbor for 7 years was a very devout Catholic person. She died already. She was born in 1918, and I learned so much about her, learned so much from her about so many things. And one of them is, after her husband died, she said, I never had any male friends because like on the day of judgment, when I go to paradise, or, like whatever, like I'm quoting here, but like her idea was like in the hereafter, if she marries more than one husband, who would she be with? So she took marriage very strictly, that you're married to one husband on earth, you're with them in the hereafter, so that's it. And her son got a divorce, so he was, she was afraid that if he wants to marry again, he'll be excommunicated from the church or something. So like she was always, worrying about the welfare of herself and her children. In Islam, people always think that, it's relatively easy for a man to divorce his wife. And it seems that way, and some people think that, and even the Muslims themselves. But if they were to go and study the law, they'll find that it's not really easy for a man to divorce his wife after all. Because first of all, to choose a wife, you have to be careful, and you start the marriage on the right basis, so you shouldn't have a reason for divorce. But if you do, if people fight, they shouldn't just divorce. They have to wait. So if, a man and a wife had physical relation in 1 month, then it's not allowed for them to divorce during that month. They have to wait. And a man shouldn't divorce his wife during her menstrual period because she'll be, with the PMS and hormones and all that. So she may be, in a grouchy mood, but she'll like him later, so he should wait. And So there are stipulations, about against the ease of divorce that people think. And once, a divorce really happens, a woman shouldn't leave the house. Theoretically, they should live together in the same house. So maybe after that initial divorce, they like each other again, and then they can reconcile. And so they have 3 chances. And then after the 3rd chance, then a woman has to remarry someone else, and then she can get divorced and then remarried. So it's like making it difficult. Like, don't take marriage and divorce so easy. So beware that you might lose that, spouse if you keep, marrying and divorcing. And but the idea is like everybody who's able should be married, because it's better to be married than not, especially for satisfaction of natural feelings. A woman could initiate a divorce, and especially in the case of cruelty and harm, or if the husband refuses her physical rights and or her material rights. And there is a cute story that a woman went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I want to divorce my husband. And he said, why? And she said, because my father forced me to marry him. So he said, okay, you can divorce him if you want. So she said, actually, I like my husband. I don't want a divorce. But I just want to make a point that a woman should not be forced into marriage. A father should not force the woman into marriage. And that she has the right to ask for divorce if she was forced into the marriage. In the case of divorce, a husband has to take care of his wife. And then there is a period afterwards also and he has to pay her, like if he had promised when there is marriage contract, and the wali or the person in charge of, usually the father or an older person in the family would represent the bride, and then would say, okay, the dowry should be this much, and then we want so much of it ahead of time, and then there is a deferred payment. The deferred payment could be at the time of death or divorce, and so a husband has to pay that as well, if in the case of divorce. Some men try not to divorce to avoid paying dowry, unfortunately. Okay, questions before, again, we move into a new topic? Mm-hmm.
Up there, when you were talking about divorce, it said that women have to apply, to get a divorce, like in court. Is the procedure the same for men as it is for women?
No, originally, like at the time of the Prophet, I guess marriage and divorce were easy. Like all the marriage requires is a consenting bride, a consenting groom, and 2 witnesses, and usually somebody to represent the bride. And then the divorce would be if a man wants to divorce his wife, he can tell her, I'm divorcing you, or he can even say, if you go out this door, you're divorced, or it's easy. But for the woman to divorce, she can ask him, I don't want to live with you, could you divorce me? He can say yes, or if he says no, then she can resort to the qadi at that time. Things were much simpler, so she can go to the qadi and say, I don't like my husband, or he's not providing, or whatever. So in that case, she has, if the husband resists, I guess, she has to go ask. But she can always ask at first the husband, but he's the one who has, unless it's written in a marriage contract, again, that the woman is in Arabic, they call it isma, the man is the one who has control, he's the sort of the one who can, end the marriage. But a woman could also ask, okay, the same way, when I was 5 or 6, 4 or 5 years old, 3, 4, whatever. One of my earliest memories anyway was Jacqueline Kennedy had just married Onassis, and my mom used to say, I can't believe that, and she wants new sheets every day, and she wants this, and she wants that. So you have the prenuptial agreement, so a Muslim woman has the right to the same thing. So one of the things she can put in her prenup is, if I want out of this marriage, then I'll do it. And also there is another way of divorcing, but it becomes final, because there is final and not final. Because with the ones that are not final, you can divorce and then come back to each other. But then the final one, you have to marry someone else before you go back together. So a woman could tell her husband, okay, I don't want you. I'm giving you back everything you wanted. Yeah, you gave me, and I'm walking out of here. And that's called khulla. Yakhla is, sort of to remove or extract or take off. So a woman could resort to that too. But then she loses her, but if she's rich and she already has everything and she doesn't need the stuff the husband got, she can resort to that. But then in that case, they cannot remarry without her remarrying someone else.
I was reading recently about whether or not it's acceptable to divorce someone via text message. Like I've heard that that's become an issue recently in certain areas.
Yeah, technology is becoming very abused, unfortunately. You know, but it has its good. But like, yeah, because divorce doesn't have to be face to face. But
just where there's no like Islamic hierarchy. I imagine most of it's through the government of the country you live
nowadays in the modern times, yeah.
But like, are some countries Muslim countries more strict about divorce than others?
No, well, in modern time they try to make it actually easier, and sometimes they make it too easy that some people would say this is against the teaching. So, like in Tunisia and Turkey, they abolished polygamy. They maybe they I don't know if they allow it. Make it like very easy for divorce, but some people are like saying, oh, why are they doing that? Because the government, yes, is in control now of, you know, like after a husband divorces his wife, he has to go through the papers, and then she has to get a piece of paper from the government saying that she's divorced. But so most, like each country has to be studied separately, and they each have their own family laws and stuff, but they try, because there are those schools of law, and some of them are stricter with women than others, and easier on women than others, and sometimes they try to find like, oh, this country is, you know, Hanafi, but then if the Maliki is easier on this point, they can adopt that point just in the case of, you know, helping a woman out, but then the other extreme is, again, Tunis or Tunisia and Turkey, where things became too loose in some people's mind. So, but governments are, like governments are secular, but then also they have to govern everything, including family law in modern times.